Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and I came back to World of Warcraft about a week ago, and I dived into the latest expansion, The War Within, the first part, the introduction, if you will, of this new thing they're doing called the World Soul Saga, basically a trilogy of expansions with a throughput narrative throughout. I came back to World of Warcraft for a couple of reasons. The overall direction of the game seemed, at least to me, to be far more in line with what I wanted out of World of Warcraft for so many years that the game didn't provide back in the days of Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands. Future content updates that they've talked about and announced looked intriguing, with things like Undermine, or going back to locations like Quel'The Lost and Northrend in the upcoming expansions. Content like Delves seemed like a good evergreen addition to add to Warcraft. And the aesthetics of Warcraft for the longest time felt as if it was going in a direction that I didn't particularly find engaging or compelling. There were things that were cool, don't get me wrong, like I think Revendreth from Shadowlands looked cool, I thought Bastion looked cool, but they didn't feel like Warcraft to me, and that is an important reason as to why I loved Warcraft and World of Warcraft for so many years. But The War Within, a bunch of dwarves, the Arathi, the Nerubians, light versus dark, that was way more my speed, and what I was looking for out of World of Warcraft for so long that it stopped providing. So for those reasons, and I just really wanted a game to sink a lot of hours into, I decided to try World of Warcraft again. And the reason I've stuck around now at this point, and the reason I'm still looking forward into the future and saying I want to be there to play this, and this, is because not only has it checked all those boxes for me, but it's exceeded my expectations for a lot of other things as well. And I want to talk about the modern World of Warcraft formula, why the old one didn't work, and why I am way more optimistic about this current one, or at least what I hope to become the new World of Warcraft formula. It's not perfect, it has its faults, but WoW was never perfect, nor was I looking for perfection. This to me is far more in the direction of design overall that I want out of Warcraft, especially in the modern day. I think it's far more sustainable. In the past, World of Warcraft had been so focused on essentially modular design, where they develop a system or a mechanic that is only meant to be utilized, largely speaking, in that one expansion and thrown away in the next expansion. I like the idea behind things like garrisons, or things like island expeditions, or warfronts. And I'm still a firm believer that if they were given more time and more iteration, with some design pivots in overall philosophy, those pieces of content could have become really fun and compelling. But because of the stubbornness that Blizzard Entertainment had back then, as well as the forced nature those pillars of content had become, to where you felt as if you were compelled to do these pieces of content because the rewards and the incentivization behind them were so strong in terms of player power, but also the design behind them just felt lackluster in the best of circumstances. Warfronts were like appallingly way too easy and simple. So instead of feeling as if you're playing a unit in an RTS game, it just felt as if you were fighting waves of essentially trash that didn't amount to much or anything. And what we saw consistently out of Blizzard was design that in theory sounded cool, but in execution and in design, because this is where I really departed from a lot of people that were talking about the issues WoW had back then. People called it an execution problem. I called it an idea problem, because the ideas behind a lot of these systems and the ways to incentivize them, to me, were faulty at best. The idea of the content itself was cool, but the role that it would serve in the game was forced, repetitive, and led to disillusionment with the state of the game. This came to a head with the Covenant system in World of Warcraft Shadowlands, where player power was tied to the aesthetic choice of these covenants. It was no longer a cool piece of player expression, it now became, okay, look up what's the most meta, because this is a multiplayer game at the end of the day. And I don't want to feel bad because I thought playing one covenant on my character looked cool, but maybe it feels bad to play because the ability sucks, or it just doesn't perform well, or it's just not fun as compared to something else. That was design that reared its ugly head in so many features and systems in World of Warcraft for many years. But it's design I've seen to a far less degree now with The War Within. I saw it a bit back when I came back a little bit for Missa Pandaria Remix, mainly with them being weirdly stubborn about upgrading gear. But in the War Within, I think their overall design philosophy is in a far more healthy place. And I think it's sustainable, with a more focus on evergreen content. Delves are easily a system that can and should, and I'm pretty sure they said they were, be carried into the future. I want to see Delves in Midnight. I want to see Delves in The Last Titan. This should be a new fixture of Endgame, because I am a big believer in this system from what I've played of them so far. And then in Midnight, we're also going to get player housing. I won't dwell on that too much. It's exciting and has a lot of potential. I need to see the execution, because they've talked about for so long the reason they couldn't do player housing was because of how old this game was and how pretty much borked the back end of it is. So I want to know how we got from that conversation to, oh, now we're going to do it. Don't get me wrong, it has a lot of potential. I'm excited because it's also going into another element of what I like out of modern Blizzard when it comes to World of Warcraft, and that is taking risks and taking chances, doing fun and wacky things. Things like Miss Pandaria Remix. Was it perfect? No. Was it great design and idea? Yes. The end of an expansion can always be a bit of a drag because you're just waiting for the new thing to come out. But if you give me a remix, I can go back to this wellspring of content that World of Warcraft has, because it's been going for like 20 years at this point, freshen up that content, incentivize me to level up a whole bunch of alts, and just experience this content with a new light and a new perspective, and it's a ton of fun! That's a great idea! What a brilliant way to make use of all the old content in this game. And I'm looking forward to the future. Could they do a Warlords of Draenor remix? That would work especially well, because like the few strengths that Warlords had are pretty much what a remix will seemingly focus on if MoP was an example. If we do Legion remix, I'm all for that. Legion was great. The idea of Plunderstorm sounds interesting. I don't know if it'll be my cup of tea, but if it's not, I can just ignore it. And if it is, I can have a bunch of fun with it. Dragonriding was brought into the game with Dragonflight, and when I came back for MoP Remix, I played a little bit of Dragonflight as well. Dragonriding's awesome. I'm so glad we've moved away from the position Blizzard had for the longest time of not treating flying as a gameplay mechanic, but now it is. Going from point A to point B in this game is fun. It's exciting. I like the feeling of speed I get. Especially for the War Within, with all the locations for these zones being like on top of each other, but displaced a bit. Flying down from the Coreway all the way down to, say, Hallowfall is cool, because you go so fast. And it makes these zones feel larger than life and epic, to a scale that WoW hasn't really seen in the longest time. And I'm just looking ahead. We're going back to Quel'Thalas at midnight. We're going to Northrend of all places in The Last Titan. Can you imagine a redesigned Northrend to this scale? Can you imagine Storm Peaks? Can you imagine Ice Crown? How cool could that be? And this is the design of the modern WoW formula, what I wanted for the longest time. Taking systems that work and taking them into the future and iterating on them, and using these systems to build on what came before. I'm excited for expansions that are not going to bring us to new locations, but redesign old locations, like Quel'Thalas, like Northrend, because these systems would work so well there. Dragonriding? Absolutely. Give me these zones, but larger than life, with the sense of scale that Dragonflight and War Within zones now provide. How many cool delves could we have in, say, Quel'Thalas, or the Ghostlands, with the Amani Trolls, or in Northrend? Now, this isn't the only reason I like the modern WoW formula, but there's another, pillar to this modern WoW formula. It still has those chores, and that busy work that we talked about before, which were reasons that I didn't like them in previous iterations of World of Warcraft, but they've largely, not fully, but largely been relegated to side content, to things like Renown, for the collectathon playstyle, where you want to collect pets, you want to collect mounts, you want to collect transmog, you want to collect toys and stuff like that. There's still plenty of busy work and chores and a whole bunch of quests that you can go do on a weekly basis if you want to do that, but you don't have to. For the most part, we'll get to the gearing system, because that's the biggest red flag of the War Within for me. But you give me a bunch of content that I can choose to do, I can choose to interface with, and if I don't like one specific pillar, I can kind of just ignore it, instead of feeling as if I have to do it. And if I want to be perfectly min-maxed, sure, If I want to absolutely, like, min-max my Great Vault, sure, but I don't feel the need to particularly do that. The Great Vault being essentially this vault you can open up on a weekly basis that gives you more opportunities for gear depending upon what kind of content you did, to what level you did it, and how many times did you do it. There's three main categories: raids, dungeons, delves. You do a certain number of delves, you unlock more slots for more chances at gear. You do higher ranked delves, that item level will be higher. Same with dungeons, same with raiding. This doesn't mean you'll just get 9 pieces of gear each week, it means it'll give you 9 options, you pick which one you want. Now, I think the gearing system in the War Within is its weakest element, but I do think it has some pros to it. Upgrading gear feels like I need a PhD to understand all these different resources and all these different conversion rates, and where to go and actually get all these, like, reagents. Oh, I gotta go get an enchanted and do this for me to transfer this resource to this resource. I think it's weirdly obtuse and just does not enhance the game or make me look forward to the gearing process. What I do like, though, is the idea behind upgrading gear. Because in that Great Vault, for instance, this isn't the only example, just as an example, say I do a bunch of rank 8 delves, and I get a really good piece of gear for those options. But they don't have the stats I want, but I did do some regular dungeons, just not to that level. But if it has a good, like, stat line, I'm like, okay, I would rather have this piece of gear because it has the stats I want on my class and spec, but it's not as good in terms of item level as the other ones. I can either say screw it and just take the higher item level if I want to, or I can take that weaker piece of gear and upgrade it with things like Valor Stones. For me, I tend to prefer more simplistic methods of gearing, and you would probably need to retool some numbers around in terms of acquisition of Valor Stones, but I think just upgrading gear with Valor Stones would be a better play than whatever the hell smorgasbord system we got going on here. It's not a system where I'm like, oh, I really want to learn this because this looks really cool. Oh, dude, I can't wait to put a work order in to get an enchanter to transfer this one resource into this other one so I can upgrade my gear by 3 item levels. Buddy, this is an element of modern WoW design that I think deserves substantial revision. When the rest of the game is going in a far more healthy and inspired direction, in my opinion, it's sad to see gearing, which is still one of the most important elements to an MMORPG, be kind of left in the dust, philosophically speaking. This feels like older Blizz design, where it's weirdly obtuse, with a bunch of hurdles that exist for seemingly no benefit to the player, other than making it more complicated and having you have to interface with more systems that you may not want to. Like, I get that it makes professions a bit more important, but is it worth it? And I would argue no. Having said that, the rest of the game is really fun to me. And I talked about the story and the storytelling with the War Within in a previous video, but I finished the entire campaign for the War Within, at least what is available now, and I'm even more optimistic now. They salvaged the character of Anduin Wrynn for me. He went from a character that I thought was absolutely trash tier, who I didn't enjoy, who I thought was a detriment to the story overall, and they've now turned him into a character I'm like, I'm actually rather interested to see where this character will go. It's not like the best story ever, or like the best storytelling ever, but I think it's some of the best we've seen out of World of Warcraft. I think voice acting, for the most part, has been drastically improved this go-around. The new cutscenes they have are absolutely great, and they've done a much better job of actually instilling emotion in a lot of these character moments and interactions, and they've made brilliant, splendid use of the stay a while and listen function. If you don't care about these smaller character moments, you can screw off and don't have to feel as if you are obliged to hear these characters yap. But if you want to hear them out, and you want to absorb this story, which is what I want to do, it gives you a little bit extra. I genuinely enjoy that element, and I'm glad that it's not forced. And they took characters who I took one glance at Dagran, right? I'm like, this dude looks like the manifestation of the nerd emoji. Who in the hell is this jabroni? How? How did they turn that guy into a likable character to me? They saved Magni Bronzebeard. That dude was an absolute meme for the longest time. The Wounds Champion. If you were there in Battle for Azeroth, you know what I'm talking about. They turned that dude into a meme. And the sad thing was, he was the representation of a lot of problems Battle for Azeroth had, because he was so deeply intertwined with a lot of those systems when it came to the amulet. But they turned him into one of my favorite characters now with the War Within. What a great dynamic he has alongside Moira, but also Dagran. They could have easily took that, like, plot point between Dagran and Magni, where Magni's concerned that Dagran's, like, curiosity is going to put him in danger, they could have turned Dagran into the most stubborn idiot of all time, like so many other things do, right? And just have him go, I'm not listening to you, Granddad, you weren't there. I'm gonna run off and do my own thing. Gets in trouble, we have to go and save him. Turns out they were both wrong, yada yada yada, right? How many times do we need to hear that story? But they don't do that here. I appreciate it when characters can just take a step back and go, you know what? You bring up a good point. Because that's what Dagran did. It's a small thing, but it's a mining canary for me that, oh, if this is the style of storytelling we're going to have now, and in this one instance, that bodes well for future storylines for me. Magni told him, hey, look, I really like you, kid, but you're putting yourself into these reckless situations for no real reason because you're curious. Maybe stop and slow down and just take a minute, right, to think? He's like, you know what? You bring up a good point. I'm gonna do that. Much better. They don't feel as if they're dragging anything particularly on for too long. The pacing in the War Within has been so good for me. And, like, think of that. Good pacing in World of Warcraft. I didn't think that was possible. But not only are they telling a much more compelling and engaging narrative, they've hinted at future plot beats that look absolutely up my alley. I love the idea so far of Midnight and the Last Titan. They're teasing at really cool world events going into the future, with Azeroth herself. I'm liking Xalatath more and more and more. She started off kind of like, bleh to me. I'm starting to actually like her as a villain now. I want to see more of Terralion and Illyria. I'm actually interested in what happens with Anduin now. Like, how do they do that? And I love the Goblin starting zone, and they're pretty much giving that to us, but turned up to 11 when it comes to Undermine in 11.1. So not only are they telling a story in a far more enjoyable way now with the War Within, but the aesthetics of the War Within are far more in line with what I want out of Warcraft than I got out of things like Dragonflight or BFA or Shadowlands. They've done a much better job with characterization and building up and hyping me up for the future, because there feels like there's direction now. There's purpose. It's not just we're winging it. It's, oh, we are building up to something, but we need time here. I am willing to give you that time because the build-up we've gotten so far has been so compelling. I can't wait for some day in like 2035 when we actually go to the Arathi Empire. That'll be cool. Gearing's a bit crap, but like there's some components to it that I like, and there's ways around the obtuse stuff that just looks off-putting to me. But like if needed, I can just learn it, right? I've been loving the gameplay. I've been just playing Retribution Paladin, and I haven't enjoyed it this much since Warlords of Draenor. The open world content is really cool to me. I like it. I like how I can take it at my own pace. I love Azj-Kahet. I love picking between who I want to support. The rumor system is cool. I love Dragonriding. I love the races. I love getting the glyphs. I love having time walking alongside all of this. I love how things are more focused on my account instead of an individual character now. Warbands are great. I love how there's not just like one dumb system that's going to be thrown away at the end of the expansion. The game actually feels like it's iterating on itself. Thank God for that. I absolutely adore delves. The early ranks were a bit too easy, right? But like I've gotten to rank 7 and 8, and it's a bit of a gear check, but there's some cool encounters there, and I'm glad they can have fun. And I like how we're just exploring all these delves with Bran Bronzebeard. Sure, that dude needs way more voice lines because oh my god, but it's kind of fun going on these expeditions, kind of like we're Indiana Jones or something with Bran Bronzebeard. And there's an actual storyline with trying to learn more about Zekfir. It's not much, but I like that it's there, and I like that they give you a customizable mount with the dirigible, and it's a lot of design where I'm no longer looking at like, this is cool in concept, how could they mess this up though? I'm looking at these things like, oh, that's cool, oh, that makes it even more cool. It's a philosophical change that has happened with me when it comes to World of Warcraft. Is the game perfect? Not by any stretch of the imagination. Is there a lot of work to be done in the future to make the game even better? Are there still some philosophical decisions that need to be axed? Absolutely, namely with gearing. But I think the direction the game is going appeals to me far more than the latest expansions have for me ever since Legion. Because I was starting to tune out of World of Warcraft back in Legion. I didn't fully leave till Shadowlands, but I was largely tuned out by then. I'm more invested and engaged with the product than I have been in what feels like the better part of a decade. And I think it's because of that modern WoW formula. More of a focus on storytelling, more of a focus on building to the future in regards to to telling a compelling story, using things that feel like Warcraft aesthetically, better characterization, more evergreen content and focusing in on that and building up instead of replacing one modular idea, going from one expansion to the other, giving me plenty of things to do, but not making me feel as if I'm forced to do these things. The music's been stellar, by the way. Please make better use of Anduin's theme song. It's been like one of the best songs they ever made for World of Warcraft, and it's so wildly underutilized. They used it a bit at the end of the War Within campaign, and I liked how they used it there. I'm just still waiting for that one big moment where, like, Anduin grows, like, paladin wings or something. He's not a paladin, he's a priest, whatever. I want that moment where he just, like, fully re-envelops with the light and we just hear his theme song blare. That would be so good. And alongside all of this, what I hope is consistency and this modern WoW identity and not throwing it away each expansion. They are willing to take risks to do these events like Missa Pandaria Remix, like Plunderstorm, like whatever they have planned for the end of 2025. They are willing to take risks alongside this sustainable evergreen core. They're able to surprise me, but also provide a routine that I enjoy. And that design appeals far more to me and appeals to me enough to make me excited and want to stick around this time with World of Warcraft. God, I'm glad to be back here. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It'd really help the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And leave a comment down below with how you feel about the War Within. What has been your favorite element to it, and what do you hope gets changed in the future? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.